you could choose a public artwork in Hong Kong. So are there any particular public artworks that are very famous in Hong Kong? Can you think of any? I think there's, what are some of the ones that you've seen in the past? I know the big rubber duck was here at one stage. Is there any particular permanent work that you can think of?
Park Link.
Public artwork?
There's a sculpture in Park Link and the hand gesture. Yeah.
A famous hand sculpture.
Yeah.
Okay. And I know that you've got a Shrejian Guo sculpture somewhere in Hong Kong where it's one of his mouses. Is that still here? It might have been moved, but there was that was called at some stage.
At Central.
Yeah, it might have been at Central.
Kind of suitman sculpture in the street.
No head, but just a big mouse.
I don't think.
Okay, I saw that in Hong Kong once before, but maybe it's been moved. Maybe it's not permanent. But then you can also choose a particular space or place in Hong Kong to analyse. So it might be just a really interesting urban space that's somewhere that you're familiar with, somewhere that you're interested in. So it might be significant to the city in some way. So what we'd like you to do is actually identify what ideas, the artwork, or the space might suggest about Hong Kong. So I'm just, for example, I'm thinking of some of the corporate squares that are around the edges of buildings in the central area, and how during the week these sort of places are spaces for the corporate workers of the city. And then on the weekend, they are often taken over by the working class Filipino maids and housework, domestic workers of the city. So they take on a completely different meaning. These are the kinds of things that might become relevant to the analysis of what you're looking at, either the artwork or the place, and how different communities bring different meaning to different sites. Okay. And also we'd like you to discuss how the work or the space reinforces existing ideas or creates new ideas about the city. So I think in the case of a site-specific artwork, you might find that the artwork might actually emphasise a new idea about the city or a new kind of way of thinking about it. I'm just thinking about Banksy's wall painting where he'd written "One Nation under CCTV" really big on the wall. But before that, that was just a blank space, just a brick wall, just a bit anonymous really. But then he wrote that big message, and it draws attention to the fact that you might be being watched in that space. So these are the kinds of things that I'd like you to try and pick up on. So in your second assessment, it's a written presentation. So in the presentation, you actually present those ideas to the class, but after you've presented those ideas, you write those up individually as a 1,000-word paper, and write that up a bit more formally. So it's a written paper, the same topic as your class presentation, and I guess you might have a chance to refine your ideas after the presentation. Your classmates might give you some feedback that will help you with perhaps structuring your paper. And it's to be completed on your own, so it's your academic opinion. You might present as a group, but you might have different ideas about the same place. Some of you might focus on different things. I'm thinking about a corporate square in Hong Kong. Perhaps some of you might focus on the diversity of the city, but others might focus on the fact that it's perhaps not really a welcoming space, a public space, or it's a bit of an exclusive public space. And then you need to upload the audio-visual support material to support your writing as well. So they're looking for images to support what you're writing. So it's always good to include images, I think, in an essay. Then your third assessment, which is your major essay, is worth 50% of your mark, and this is due to the very end of the essay. but it's 1,500 words, and the research essay is in response to set topics. So it needs to be well researched with a range of sources. There's accurate referencing, and it includes a bibliography and uses well-constructed written expression. Are there any questions about the assessment?
It's 1,500 words. Yes, because the first page is 1,800.
Oh, was it? Okay.
Yeah.
Let me just, I'll have to check that one actually. I have to check the course guide, yeah. But I think between 1,500 and 1,800 is probably the limit. But I think maybe probably 1,500 would be okay for your group. But I'll double check that in the course guide in a moment. Okay, so submission of assignments. All written assignments need to be submitted electronically via Blackboard using the Turnitin system, and I'm sure you're all familiar with Turnitin. That's not a problem for you to use. I've got some images so that you can see. You just look for the assignment tab, and then that will come up with whichever assignment. This is actually for art history, but it will come up with whichever assignment is due. And you just click on that, it takes you to the Turnitin page. Then you just actually have to look for your name as an enrolled student. If your name's not there might be a problem with your enrolment, so you just probably need to check with admin on that one. Or, just have a word to them about it and see if there's some problem there. And then you need to fill in your details, put in your name, what the exhibition, what the assignment is, upload the file from your hard drive, and then that will show up there. So if it's incorrect, you still have a chance to remove it. And then you upload, and it will give you a bit of a summary of what it is you've got. It will also at that point be checking for materials that are original sources as well, so just be mindful of that. And then finally you will reach a page that says congratulations, your submission is complete, and this is your digital receipt. You can print a copy of this receipt from within the document viewer. So it's a good idea with all your assignments to keep a receipt so that just in case anything goes wrong and you've lost the assignment, or you get an email from the lecturer saying that you haven't handed it in, you've got some sort of proof that you have it. So submission of assignments. It's recommended you upload your assignments by 12 p.m. on the due date so that you can resolve any technical issues before the deadline in case you have a problem. So just make sure you do it a few hours earlier. You still have a chance to call IT and actually sort out problems. Otherwise, if there are minor problems and you need help, you can always see some of the admin staff here as well. They might be able to sort it out for you if they know how to. And then the process for extensions and special considerations. If you have an extension, Terry's no longer here. It's got Terry's email on it. It's actually for extensions, you do actually have to contact Drew Pettifer, who's here, Drew Pettifer at rmit.edu.au. He's actually the course coordinator, so he'll be doing all the marking for this class. But yes, if you're needing up to 7 days, then that can be through your tutor. You'll be having, I think Elaine is taking the tutoring for this class. So you'll be able to ask through your tutor for the extension. But if it's more than 7 days, then it becomes a special consideration process. And that's only if there's something serious that's happened that you need to take time off for. So for an example, you're very ill, you have to go to hospital, or you need to have an operation, or there's been some major disruption in the family, a family member's passed away, something like that. It has to be pretty serious. But you you will need some documentation for the special consideration process. And RMIT website has a page on special consideration. You just go through that process. You have to probably fill in an application and submit documentation. Might be a medical certificate, or might be a letter from your family or something. Okay, so any late submissions, if you've not granted an extension or special consideration, late submission will be penalised as follows. So if you don't, even if you're sick a couple of days beforehand, it's a good idea to just send your tutor an email just saying, look, I don't think I'm going to make the deadline, and I have a day or two extension. It's more than likely that they will give it to you, but if you don't bother to submit and then you ask for the extension after the due date, you're not going to get it. So just try and contact your tutor as early as possible. If you have not been granted an extension or special consideration, late submission will be penalised for assessment tasks 1 to 5 days late, a penalty of 10% of total available marks per day. For assessment tasks more than 5 days late, a student will only be eligible for a pass or fail maximum grade of 15%. So no assessment task shall be accepted more than 10 days after the due date. So it is really important that you keep that receipt if you've actually submitted something, because it does mean that you will be able to, if there is a problem and the lecturers think it's a late submission, they'll start taking marks off. So just make sure that you've got that digital receipt so that you can actually make sure, if they can't find it, there's some problem. So just in terms of grading, it's the usual way that we grade the students, with 80 to 100 being a high distinction. So if you're getting a mark that's in the high distinction, this means you're attending all the lectures, you're attending all the tutorials, and you're really engaging with the materials that we are suggesting you have a look at, and even beyond that, you're looking at new materials as well. So we really want to see quite a bit of effort, and it's highly unlikely that you get a high distinction without attending everything and also really participating in class as well. And then with a distinction, also, it's also, we want to see effort, we want to see engagement with the materials, and then obviously credit is just, probably still attending, still coming to everything, but perhaps maybe your understanding of the material is not as sophisticated as some of the people that are getting distinction and high distinction. And a pass, I guess, is really if you've attended everything and handed in everything, you'll probably get a pass. But if you haven't really made an effort to actually understand the material, then that probably won't get awarded much more than a pass. And a fail is if you don't submit things and you're late with your work. But just I do want you to be mindful. It's not that hard to get a high distinction. It just means that you really need to come to all the classes and also really pay attention to the material. But there is a band, 80 to 100 is the high distinction band, so it's quite a big margin. So it's not that hard to get a high distinction because distinctions only has a 10-mark band. So it is, possible to do well in this class. Okay? And just in terms of the format of how we're doing this class, obviously I'm doing these intensive lectures, which are mostly in face-to-face. Sorry, this is probably a statement. But there are also 4 lectures that are online, and I'm also going to be bringing those here for you. With the tutorials, you will be face-to-face with Elaine. Are your tutorials usually 2 hours?
2 hours.
2 hours, yeah. Okay, and just in terms of tutorials, I think the good thing about tutorials is that you get to actually have a really good discussion about some of the ideas, and I know that with the lectures you've taken a lot of information and probably some of it's a bit overwhelming because of so many ideas all packed into a couple of hours. But at least you will have a bit of time to sit with these ideas throughout the semester. So a good tutorial will mean that you're interactive, that that a significant amount of time input is from the student. You know, that the tutor will just facilitate discussion, and but the discussion really comes from you as the student. So that's a big part of being in the tutorials and being an active participant, active learning. And the tutorial will also be a really good opportunity for you to clarify any ideas that you may not be too sure about, or even ask questions so that you can understand something a little bit further, and also introduce new ideas and approaches, and also to engage with the topics that we've actually presented in the lectures. So you'll be able to actually unpack those topics further and actually start applying that to your own context and to your practice. Think about how some of these ideas might actually influence the way you make your work. I've been told that I think Chris Coden is taking some of the ceramic students to an island tomorrow. Is anyone going to be up to Marianne Island? Any ceramic students here? No? Okay, so I mean, in your I know that there's quite in the studio areas, you're looking at ideas around place, and so you will be able to make those connections between some of the theory that we're learning here and you know, apply that into the studio as well. There's also you know, tutorials ultimately provide you with a tool for engaging with and understanding history and theory, but also to relate back to your practice and to have a bit of a deeper engagement with some of the things that you might be thinking about in your art making. So I'm just going to give you some essay writing tips. I'm sure you're all familiar with essay writing. Does everyone like essay writing here, or you're not really a big fans of it? Not big fans. Well, I'll just tell you something that I've thought. I think people often get quite nervous about essay writing and think they're not sure what they're going to write. But if you think of it as a bit of a formulaic process, that there's a particular order of things that you need to do, then I think you'll probably find it a little bit easier. So obviously you start with your research question. And a good thing to do with your research question, so the question is, describe and analyse a public place in Hong Kong. Okay, so and you've picked one of the big shopping centres to analyse. So the first thing you would do is perhaps define some of the words. So you might define, describe and analyse. What does that require you to do? And then also public place. What does that, how do you define public place? So you'd probably find a definition of that. And then these are all things that you will be able to use to answer that question. And so something that's really important is that you're trying to answer a question through the essay. And then, so once you've actually done your research, perhaps you've gone to the place, you've read about public places, maybe you've read some the fair about the production of space, and you start thinking about how does that refer to public place, you know, and then you might think about the non-place, how does that connect to the shopping centre, and perhaps some of these ideas might help start answering your question. And then once you've got in your mind what you think is the direction that you'd like to answer this question in, then you might start actually doing your basic essay planning. And so you have to think of the introduction, the body and the main point, and the conclusion. actually answering your question. It's telling me how you tried to answer the question. I will look at the IFC Mall in Hong Kong as a public space, and I am interested in looking at Marc Augé's non-places in relation to describing and analysing the IFC Mall. So that's how you would introduce your topic. So you clearly state your contention. You give an overview of the key points you will be covering, and then you aim to give the reader a clear idea of what to expect. So you're leading the reader through the paper, and then you're saying, and you're going to start by discussing why you think the IFC Mall is a non-place, for example. And then that will be one of your main points. So the body actually constitutes a number of points. So you might only, for a 1,500 word essay, you probably only need about 4 or 5 points to cover. And that's already 4 or 5 paragraphs. And you actually allocate 1 paragraph to each point is a good way of thinking about it. And try to order the paragraphs so they work together to construct a coherent, logical progression of the argument or discussion. So you have to think about it as a discussion you're having, a discussion that answers that question. So just within each paragraph, this is kind of the structure of each paragraph. So you're repeating this over throughout the paper. So the topic sentence uses sentence related to the topic, which makes it clear what point is the paragraph. So maybe my first sentence will be, I've selected the IFC Mall, and I believe it relates well to Marc Augé's discussions on the non-place because it is a place that is for a transaction. And then evidence, you would say, perhaps you can talk about how the architecture of the space it creates a non-place kind of shopping centre environment, and you might have a quote from Augé that directly relates to how that space makes you feel, and you might explain that afterwards. And then the final sentence usually links to the next sentence, the next paragraph actually, and that's how you usually connect the paragraphs between each other. So the body of the essay, you actually repeat that teal process throughout. And if you think of it like you're filling in a form, I think it's easier to conceptualise writing an essay. It's not as daunting because it's like, oh, you're filling in bits of information and then you're making that writing flow through. Okay? And then your conclusion should be 1 paragraph, and it actually provides a bit of a summary of the overview of the points that are presented. And it includes any insights gained into the question. So by the end of the paper, you might have analysed the IFC Mall in a number of different ways, but by the end of it, you might have decided, oh, maybe it isn't a non-place because of particular emotional qualities that it might have. And so you would actually state that again in conclusion. After looking at all these different aspects of the mall, I've decided that it's not a non-place, and this is supported by, and then you provide the evidence to say why you think that. And I think that the main thing is providing that evidence and making sure that the reader understands that it's not just your opinion. It's not just, I like this place. It's, no, I think this is a non-place because, according to Augé, it has all these characteristics which I can see in this place. place for transactions. It's a place for movement of people. It's designed for in a particular way. And then at the very last sentence, you try and finish with a strong statement that directly answers the question. Okay? So that just kind of gives you a bit of an idea of how you structure your paper. And once you've got that formula kind of embedded in your head, that will help you a lot. I think if in undergraduate you get the essay structure writing down pat, then it'll put you in a good preparation for further study if you do go on to masters or any of the other study that you might be interested in doing, because you'll have that basic essay writing very logically well planned, and then later on when you're moved on from undergraduate, you can become a little bit more creative with your writing. But if you can get all these main things in now, and then that will give you a good foundation for your writing skills. The essay plan. So just to review, that's kind of a little bit of a format of what your essay will look like. And I think that really helps you with, if you kind of treat it like a form that you're filling in, and then you put it all together, then you'll find that it actually, and just, when you read through it, make sure it sounds logical. When you finish your essay plan, then you start writing your first draft. Spend 15 minutes writing your first draft of the essay plan, or this is actually still planning. Come up with the main body of information, allocate approximate word limits to each section, and when you return to the material, revise your essay plan, add more detail, improve the order flow. Do this at least once before you complete the essay. So writing is a process. The first draft is never going to be perfect. So usually you source your materials, you write a plan based on the materials you've looked at. Then you write your first draft, and then you edit it again, and you've got your second draft. The second draft is probably looking a bit better. It's probably a good point when you're at that point to ask someone to have a look at it, another friend or someone else that can just review the material for you, and sort of, tell you if it makes sense. Sometimes that helps a lot. And then just in regards to referencing, please do make sure that you clearly reference anything that is not your idea. Not just direct quotations, even ideas. So with ideas, it's paraphrasing. You're making sure that those people are credited. If you've actually taken a quote from them, then it's an in-text citation. The thing about coming to university and taking material from other sources, out of respect, it is really important that you properly cite what their ideas, because it is teaching you to be respectful in the world of knowledge that we actually draw from. And I think it's really important to just make sure that authors and their ideas are properly cited. And yes, it is very much it is about respecting that they've actually published that they're an authority on that area. Okay, and also artists with their works. If you end up using artwork as evidence to support your discussions, then you should make sure that their name and the year that the artwork was made is all listed there. So just quick word about plagiarism. I'm sure you've all gone through this before, but in our policy it is the presentation of work, idea or creation of another person as though it is your own. Plagiarized material can be drawn from and presented in written, graphic, and visual form, including electronic data and oral presentation. So plagiarism occurs when the origin of the material is not appropriately. So So it just means you just need to make sure that you acknowledge that you've used the other material. So it is quite easy to plagiarise. Here are a few examples just so that you can make sure that you're not doing it. Copying sentence or paragraphs word for word from one or more sources, whether published or unpublished, without copyright. So when if you lift a whole paragraph from a website, that will come up in turn it in. It will say there's 4% of text. If it is a direct quote, just make sure the citation's there, because it will when the lecturer is marking, when Drew is marking, he will check if you've got a direct quote, if you've actually got the name of the person that said that quote next to it, then that's fine. But it does come up as material that is from another source. Okay? And closely paraphrasing sentences. So you need to really, the reason why we don't want you to firstly copy or to make your sentences too similar is that it's requiring you to actually reinterpret the idea. So that's a part of the process of learning. It's actually, we're not trying to do it to torture you, but to actually get you to actually think about that idea and how do you say that in a different way? How do you say it in your own words? That process is going to help you to own that idea, and as a result you will learn that idea. So it's not designed to be annoying or to torture you with not trying to copy, but it is actually a learning process that we're trying to instill in the students. Okay? And then the other thing is piecing together text from one or more sources and adding only linking sentences. So even grabbing sentences here and there and actually adding linking words is also can be considered plagiarism. So just think about how you reword things, okay? And then copying designs or works of art and submitting them as the original work. You all know about the concept of appropriation. So if it's directly copied, that's not okay. But if you've actually altered you're taking the idea, but you've altered it, but you're actually telling us that you're referencing a particular thing, then that's a different story, because that's called appropriation. But just make sure you're very clear on what's the difference between copying and appropriation. I think with appropriation, there is actually a standardised percentage of how much the work has to be changed. So something like the Mona Lisa and Marcel Duchamp's LHOQ, that's appropriation, even though the image is an image of the Mona Lisa, but because it is so different in material and because he's made a face in line, so it's a black and white copy, it's not even the same material on paper, it's got writing on it. So Duchamp's actually made it his own, but it still references the Mona Lisa. So obviously, I'm sure you've had those discussions in your studio classes at some point. And copying a whole or any part of another student's work is also considered plagiarism. And submitting work as your own that someone else has done for you, so that's also problematic. So plagiarism is considered a form of cheating. It is a very serious academic offence that may lead to expulsion from the university. So just to be safe, and if in doubt, just reference the information anyway. Even if you think it's overkill, it's better to be safe than actually to, you put in a credit for something that you've read. So, other information on plagiarism statement or pursuit. Be aware that you are confirming that your degree to this statement when you submit your essays online. So by doing so, you are certifying the material on your assignment is plagiarized. Okay, just in relation to referencing, we always use the Harvard style referencing guide. And if you haven't got a copy printed out and sitting on your desk, it's a really good idea to do that so that you can always refer to it. You either do an in-text reference or and then it is also listed in the reference. So here we've got an example. Chion also describes the intersensory reciprocity which exists between sound and images. We should then confuse our eyes and ears with our sense of the visual and the sonic. Chion uses the term transsensorial perception to describe the blurring of boundaries between the senses. So this idea comes from Chion, and Chion is here credited, and the date that he wrote that. So that must have been in an article that he wrote. And then in the reference list, you would list Chion, the full details, Chion M, 1990, what paper it was, Audio Vision, Sound on Screen, Columbia University Press, in New York. And so you would follow that format with each listing. We're going to do a quick citation exercise. So you have direct quotes and indirect quotes. Okay. So a direct quote is, this is an example. Ironically, in the late 1890s, the car and the electric tram were seen as bringing about the tranquility of noiselessness in the urban environment, replacing the noise of horse and cart over cobblestone streets. So Coates wrote that in 2005, and it was written on page 621. So she's actually, that idea has been summarised and put in here. But here, R. Murray Schafer, 1970, was particularly critical of the noise pollution of contemporary urban environments. So that is actually his idea. And it's been credited to him. Okay, and that's if you want to use his full name, you want to actually use him. Another thing that's quite good is if you're introducing a writer, you're talking about Michel Foucault, and it's always quite a good idea because he's already passed away. It's a good idea to put in the dates that he was born and he died, and perhaps say who he is. Michel Foucault, French sociologist and philosopher. It's a good idea to introduce who these people are, so you can put them into a context. You might even say influential French, philosopher, sociologist, and philosopher. Because sometimes when you're reading and suddenly Smith comes into it, and you're thinking, who is Smith? Why do we care? So it's quite nice to put the context of that into it. Okay? So if you've got more than one author, you can put both of their surnames in as Harrison and Wood after an idea that you may have used of theirs. And if you've got a direct quote from a website, for Art Online, you just put in, and you can't find the author, you just put in the name of the website and you put in the paragraph. Okay? If you've taken that idea from Art. And secondary citations are okay. Sometimes you will find that someone very famous has been written about by someone else. So you've got a paper by John Smith, but he's talking about Nigel Thrift. Okay, so you want to put the Nigel Thrift quote in, but it's actually the paper's written by John Smith. So you have to say that it's it's Nigel Thrift cited in John Smith, but here we've got Jack Katz was cited in Thrift. So Jack Katz actually, Thrift wrote about Jack Katz, and then in the bibliography we will still list it. Okay. With formatting a bibliography, you should put it in alphabetical order according to surname, and this is the kind of format it will look like. You'll have, it's always the first name, the initials, the space, the year, the title of the book, and it's always in italics. Make sure all titles, even titles of artwork, should be in italics. The publisher and the place. Okay? And just a word about sources. We strongly encourage that you use published books, journal articles, arts industry magazine specific to your area, and then also exhibition catalogues, because we're dealing with artists. So they're the kind of four main areas which I would expect you to use materials on. With websites, I think you need to be a lot more selective. We often